So I did some looking further into, I mentioned in a video earlier, well, yesterday really, that I put up about my grandfather owning it was a shield and mica chip company back in the late 40s, early 50s in Chicago, and then it moved to Bensonville, and it was called Perfection Mica. Yet nowhere can I find his name, and yet he owned that company. Okay? At the same time, my grandmother, my grandfather, and their two children, my mom and uncle, they went to Washington for for some New Year's Eve event for Scientology, because they had went to a couple meetings on Scientology, but that was it. My grandmother, it caused her anxiety. She wanted nothing to do with it. But my grandfather kept giving them so much money, okay? Like it was like they were pulling him in. So I came across this, the original founding church of Scientology, Washington, D.C. So that would make sense. If he was involved in military, or it was military contracts he was involved in, my grandfather back then, with Lockheed. It wasn't Lockheed Martin then, it was Lockheed Corporation. They became Lockheed Martin once they merged later on. So they had a fallout. So I'm just wondering, because as I said in my other video, all around this same time, Scientology was trying to pull them in. My grandmother wanted nothing to do with it, but it was so bad that my grandmother had went to a bar in Chicago where she knew the mafia had ties, and she had asked the bartender, can I pay to have somebody kill L. Ron Hubbard? Now, she wouldn't have gone, but that was how bad it was. This was a story that was told all the time, because it was so weird, and we just didn't think much of it. But if people remember many years ago, the actress, is it Leah Remini? She was on that Kings and Queens. She was on Joe Rogan many years ago because she escaped the Scientology that she had been in all her life. And so she revealed it all on Joe Rogan's show. And I remember my dad had called me and said, you need to watch that. Your grandmother talked about all this stuff. That my family wasn't in it that long. Maybe that's why they kept coming after him and bothering him. Scientology is known for doing that. But I also think it was tied to Lockheed Corporation, because my grandfather and Lockheed had a falling out. And then I just wonder if there was, they were threatening him, and that's why my grandfather kept giving them money. The worst part is that my grandfather was an alcoholic who quit drinking, and Scientology told him he's okay now. He can drink in a controlled way. Well, come to find out, Scientology and the CIA are pretty much one and the same. In fact, the FBI says that Scientology has better intelligence capabilities than even they do. So it's nothing new that all of this, like Lockheed Corporation was the biggest military contract, especially back in the 50s. And that's what my grandfather had government contracts with them, but had a falling out. We don't know why. But they were the military-industrial complex back then, so they were also tied to the CIA. So as you see here, a brief weird history of brainwashing, L. Ron Hubbard, Operation Midnight Climax, terrorism, the race for mind control changed America forever. Yeah, my grandmother felt like my grandfather was, why he couldn't snap out of it. Even when they moved, they followed them to California. So was it some separate incident? I don't think so. I don't think so, because Lockheed also was tied to the CIA as well. Scientology is the CIA. Over the years, many newspapers have done articles about this. The Scientology Church was engaged in an all-out war to identify, attack, and discredit its enemies, including government officials and journalists. Yeah, they would harass them, sort of like what they were doing to my grandfather, and maybe that's why he kept giving them money. And maybe it was because there was this fallout with Lockheed. I mean, it just seems suspicious. Lockheed and CIA were tied together. My grandfather has a fallout with them. We don't know over what. At the same time, the family was introduced to, come and check out these Scientology meetings. They only went to a couple, and my grandmother wanted nothing to do with it. But then they were harassing and followed them from Chicago to California. And this was an internal document, Scientology internal document on CIA cooperation, confiscated by Greek police. Yeah, so because my grandfather had a fallout with Lockheed Corporation, is that why then they stuck the CIA, or were they trying to pull people in that were involved in any kind of military contracts? I don't know. I want answers to it, because I should be able to search the internet and find, because my grandfather owned Perfection Mica, yet and much of Perfection Mica was also about magnetic shields. Okay, it kind of went together. So it's been rolled into this other company, Shield Magnetic Organization. And I get it. My grandmother sold the company. She took over when my grandfather died. She sold it to my uncle, who then went on to change the name and move it to Indiana. But still, there still should be a trail, because my grandfather owned it, Perfection Mica. And they just seem to have rolled Perfection Mica without even, into this. Yeah, I want answers, because the whole thing is all shady. My grandmother deliberately blamed Scientology for my grandfather dying early. He died before I was born. So, he died young, because he went back to drinking. And I would say he was probably drinking a lot, because I imagine maybe he was being shaken down by the government. There's been many newspapers and reporters that have disclosed stuff on the CIA and Scientology, but the tiny article, the Washington Post, on January 13th, 1979, read something like, from a cartoonishly sinister spy show. CIA documents released yesterday show the agency once considered using drugs, shock treatments, and even removal of parts of the brain to dispose of blown agents, exploited defectors, and defecting trainees. U.S. State Department lobbies the interests of Scientology in various countries: France, Germany, Italy, Greece, Russia, Hungary, etc. Even among the published WikiLeaks documents, a report slipped by that after U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright's arrival in Germany, German Scientologists were invited to the U.S. Embassy for a briefing. Inasmuch as I know, no other cult enjoys such attention. L. Ron Hubbard also had, and this is the man my grandmother hated, he had a fascination with Aleister Crowley. He even considered himself friends with him. All his life, Hubbard himself was quite actively and constantly fascinated with two things: occultism and intelligence activities. For example, as still wholly young man, he entered the Rosicrucian order, undertook occult seances, and experienced certain otherworldly meetings. And then, as it says here, a large mass of information, so that with its help it can compromise, establish control over whomever, from a simple member of the cult who has gone astray to the powerful of this world. Control of who would give unlimited possibilities. 25 years ago, the former head of FBI's Los Angeles field office said that Scientology has one of the most effective intelligence services, which can even compete with the FBI. So I likely will never get to any, answers to any of this, but I should, because something happened between Lockheed Corporation, my grandfather, why he's not listed as the once owner of Perfection Mica, and why he was harassed by Scientology, aka the CIA, after his fallout with Lockheed. I want those answers. this country.